Chapter 649 Cultivation Age. Chapter 649 Cultivation Age. Bastard. Qinxiu Wuhan could not help cursing to himself. Actually, he could have broken into the divine realm several hundred years ago. However, in order to impress others with the feeling that his power was high above his realm, he had intentionally avoided breaking through. He had never thought that he would be swallowed up among many other geniuses. Bad luck had caught him in succession. First, he had been overpowered by Gong Chao and Jian Wushuang. Then Jing Xinzi out of nowhere had come to defeat him, and now when he finally could have been ranked top 3, the fourth round frustrated him again. The test pushed him into the situation where he could not hide his secret anymore. I had thought he was a genius of extraordinary talent, but now I've learned it's just because he has cultivated much longer than the others. He doesn't deserve to be our inner disciple. Go tell him that we'll revoke our previous invitation, and to show our mercy, we can take him as an outer disciple. A black-haired elder from Cloud Sea Asgard ordered his men. The middle-aged man from the Immortal Dynasty and the girl from the Boundless Demon Sect gave out a similar order as well. Next up, Feng. When Feng's name was called, all the geniuses on the drill ground looked at him with interest. He was the first one from the ancient world to take the test. You've cultivated for over 1,900 years, and for about 1,800 of them, you've been in the skyscraping realm. Feng forced a bitter smile at the results, while the other geniuses could not help sighing. So far, the longest cultivation time for the Eternal World geniuses was 810 years, far shorter than 1,900 years. Shenyi, is he the trash that you thought so highly of? He is a good-for-nothing, said the elder from Cloud Sea Asgard coldly. I don't think so. Shenyi gave him an easy smile. We all know that the conditions in the ancient world are quite disadvantageous to those cultivators, so I think he's done well to have made it so far. Besides, you also heard that he's been in the skyscraping realm for the remaining 1,800 years, which means it has only taken him 100 years to reach that realm. He indeed has got some talent. Whatever, that's no excuse for his poor results. The elder did not change his mind. Xianyi shrugged with no desire to argue with him further. The test continued on. Huaying, Bingshan, Xianing, and Wu Huang followed Feng in taking their turns. Among those four, the latter three all had cultivated for more than 2,000 years, and Wu Huang had even cultivated longer than 2,800 years. As for Huaying, who had the longest among the rest of them, his cultivation life was an amazing 3,700 years. That number caused the other geniuses to cry out in surprise. Next is Gong Chao. The voice of the host quieted down the whole drill ground, as well as the skyward pavilion. Everyone held their breath to see Gong Chao's result. They all wanted to know how long this number 1 genius, the terrifying monster, had cultivated. If it turned out to be more than 800 years, his fame as the number 1 genius would be challenged. But, if it were to be a much shorter time, such as 300 or 400 years, he would be able to protect his fame. Gong Chao. Jian Wushuang watched him closely. This person was the only one among everyone in the Firmament Territory feast that he took seriously. From the very beginning he had been keeping an eye on him. Under everyone's gaze, Gong Chao went over to Elder Qiu and gave him a drop of his blood. In no time the elder announced the result in an astonished voice. You've cultivated for less than 120 years and reached the skyscraping realm only 50 years ago. A commotion began on the drill ground the very moment that those words were uttered. Less than 120 years? Unbelievable. Jing Xinzi was frozen for a moment. Although her cultivation life of 210 years was shorter than that of many others, Gong Chao's was nearly half of hers. In the skyward pavilion, the experts from every sect were thrilled at Gong Chao's results. They praised him in amazement. Genius, exceptional genius. I thought that he should have cultivated for over 400 years, but it turns out that it's so much shorter. 120 years. It's amazing that he could make it so far in a short 120 years. Right then, Gong Chao heard his name echo throughout the place from the room on the top floor of the skyward pavilion. I'm the 9th elder of Cloud Sea Asgard, Shi Qianhan. The voice continued, you're so gifted that I want to invite you to be our disciple. All our resources for cultivation will be open to you, and I'll help you earn personal guidance from our master. As long as you try hard, I ensure you that you can reach the eternal realm in 10,000 years. Are you willing to accept my invitation? Those words startled all the geniuses present. They could not believe that the 9th elder of Cloud Sea Asgard had wanted to recruit Gong Chao with such attractive conditions. Personal guidance from a Super Dao master. This was something that many experts would pursue their entire lifetime. In addition to that, there was the promising future of reaching the Eternal Realm in 10,000 years waiting for Gongqiao. Those conditions gave such a thrill to the geniuses, even though they were not for them. As Gongqiao was considering it, more invitations from the other sects began to come his way. Chapter 650 Jian Wushuang's Cultivation Time. Chapter 650 Jian Wushuang's Cultivation Time. Gongqiao, as long as you join our immortal dynasty, we will try hard to train you and ensure that you reach the Eternal Realm within 10,000 years. With luck, you may be able to do it in 3,000 years. We can do that for you too, Gongqiao. What's more, our master has planned to accept a personal disciple. Because you are so talented, that lucky guy will probably be you. Someone from the Boundless Demon Sect chimed in. Those two sects tried to attract Gongqiao with their offerings as well. The two of you. Seeing that there were two more competitors, Shi Qianhan shouted angrily. What? You have made your offer, so why can't we? The man from the Immortal Dynasty yelled back coldly. Fine, I'd love to see if your conditions are really more attractive than ours. Shi Qianhan's voice was icy yet confident. The competition for Gongqiao between the three sects confused the onlookers. The other experts in the Skyward Pavilion were surprised as well. They had never seen anyone before that was wanted by all three of the magnates. At last, Cloud Sea Asgard was victorious over the other two sects due to its irresistible offerings. Then Gongqiao became their disciple. The two failed sects had to give up, however unwilling they might have been. The test of the geniuses' cultivation ages went on. Finally, it was Jian Wushuang's turn. Next up, Jian Wushuang. The moment that his name was called, many people began to look at him. As the only one who had managed to force Gongqiao to go all out, it would have been hard for him to go unnoticed. Now Jian Wushuang is going to take the test. How long do you think he has cultivated? The voice of the man from the Immortal Dynasty again echoed in the Skyward Pavilion. I think at least more than 2,000 years. That's too talented for him. I think it must be longer than Huaying. Maybe. But, considering that he has gotten some opportunities to gain the doppelganger secret skill, he may have relied on something other than time to gain his current power. Those experts chatted with each other while watching Jian Wushuang take his test. Mr. Shen Yi, Jian Wushuang is your disciple. Are you really not interested in his cultivation time? The girl from the Boundless Demon Sect asked Shen Yi. Those sects had promised Shen Yi that they would give up trying to recruit all the 6 geniuses from the ancient world, so in their eyes, Jian Wushuang was already a member of the ancient sect. Shen Yi laughed at the girl's words. Since I've accepted him as our inner disciple, it doesn't matter how long he has cultivated. Even if he is more than 4,000 years old and at the day of his doom, I won't change my mind and I'll help him go further. Shi Qianhan interrupted their talk with irony in his voice. If he is really that old, he is indeed trash in view of his current power. Does he deserve your care and help? I'll just say it, you are just wasting your time and resources. We have nothing but time and resources in our sect, so as long as I want, I can push him up to the Eternal Realm. That's beyond your reach, isn't? Shen Yi sneered and fought back. On hearing this, Shi Qianhan's face darkened slightly. It would take so many resources to push a skyscraping realm expert up to the Eternal Realm that only the 3 magnates were able to do it. However, even if they were to do that, the cost would be too high. And being just one of the elders in Cloud Sea Asgard, Shi Qianhan was in no position to try it. He was different from Shen Yi. Shen Yi was recognized as the #1 Eternal Realm expert in the Firmament territory, second only to his master in the ancient sect. In addition to that, he possessed many treasures himself, so it was easy for him to achieve that. Whatever, if you want to waste your money, go right ahead, Shi Qianhan said coldly. Let's wait and see. On the drill ground, as Jian Wushuang walked over to Elder Qiu, everyone's eyes were fixed on him. Even Gongqiao looked at him with sharp eyes. Jian Wushuang. He watched him closely. Jian Wushuang was the only one in the Firmament territory feast that he regarded as his opponent. Though he had defeated him, he still thought that Jian Wushuang had restrained his power when battling him. When Jian Wushuang walked up to Elder Qiu, the latter ordered him in an icy voice. Give me a drop of your blood. Jian Wushuang immediately squeezed a drop of blood out from his finger. The elder put the blood into the container and started examining it. After being calm for several moments, the elder suddenly had a shocked expression on his face. How could this be possible? He murmured. He could not believe his eyes and then looked up at Jian Wushuang. Please give me one more drop of your blood. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded and did as he had been told. This time, the elder examined the blood with more scrutiny, but to his surprise, the result was still the same. It can't be. This. He stared at Jian Wushuang in horror as if he was staring at a ghost. He opened his mouth and tried to say something, but for a while, not a sound escaped his mouth. The host saw his unusual behavior and asked with concern, "What's the matter, Elder Chiu?" The elder hemmed and hawed, and after taking a deep breath, he turned over to face the skyward pavilion and bowed. Finally he could speak again. "Ladies and gentlemen, Jian Wushuang's result has come out." His voice betrayed his astonishment, echoing throughout the whole place. "It has been less than 40 years since he started cultivating." What? Everyone was startled by those words. Less than 40 years. And he has been in the skyscraping realm for less than 1 year. The elder's voice echoed again. Chapter 651 Jian Wushuang is a peerless super genius. Chapter 651 Jian Wushuang is a peerless super genius. As Elder Chiu finished speaking, the noisy drill grounds suddenly quietened. The words echoed in their ears. His cultivation age was less than 40. He reached the skyscraping realm less than 1 year ago? Elder Chiu. The presiding middle-aged man regained his composure first. He looked at Elder Chiu and said with a smile, "Did you miss something? Did you take 4,000 years as 40 years?" All eyes gazed at Elder Chiu, hoped he had made a mistake. Elder Chiu took a deep breath, said, "I didn't believe it at first, so I checked it twice. The results are the same. I swear to you that the test result is true. Jian Wushuang's cultivation age is less than 40 years and he reached the skyscraping realm less than a year ago." Elder Chiu had sworn on his life. No one could doubt it anymore. But cultivation age less than 40 years, the skyscraping realm less than 1 year. Many of the experts from all sects in the skyward pavilion were muttering vacant-eyed. Just now they were guessing how long Jian Wushuang had cultivated. Most of them thought it was over 2,000 years. A few guessed Jian Wushuang had gotten some lucky opportunities and thought it would not be longer than Feng and Hui Ying's cultivation age but at least 1,000 years. It was a miracle if Jian Wushuang could have made it within 1,000 years in such a poor cultivation environment. Feng, strong and having a high potential, had cultivated for 1,900 years. However, when they heard the test result, all of them were astounded. They were stunned. Totally stunned. So were the geniuses on the drill grounds. 40 years, less than 40 years. Huiying growled and went red in the face. A complicated feeling of being astounded, amazed but more ashamed flashed in his eyes. Both of us cultivated in the ancient world. I have spent 3,700 years, he just spent 40 years. How could he be so much stronger than me? I have lived for 3,700 years in vain. At this moment he hoped to find a hole and to hide in it. Among all the geniuses here, he had spent the longest time in cultivation. Besides, he came from the same ancient world with Jian Wushuang. To cultivate in the same environment, Jian Wushuang spent only 40 years, but he spent 3,700 years. More importantly, Jian Wushuang was stronger than him. What have I done with my time? How could it be possible? Less than 40 years? You must be kidding. Dear God, am I in a dream? A genius coming from the ancient world who has only cultivated for 40 years is much stronger than us. We are geniuses of the eternal world. Is it because I know little of what is going on in the ancient worlds? Has the cultivation environment of the ancient worlds become better than that of the eternal world? People on the drill grounds were also in shock. Crazy. All of them felt that the world had gone mad. His cultivation age is less than 40 years. Even Gong Chao was gasping with astonishment. He was known as a real super genius, counted as one of the best of all the geniuses of all Firmament Territory feasts so far. Despite his talent and cultivation in the eternal world, he had spent 120 years and had been in the skyscraping realm for 50 years. Jian Wushuang, cultivated in the ancient world. He spent much less time than him, and despite this he was nearly as strong as him. If he was a monster, a super genius, what was Jian Wushuang? A peerless super genius. A peerless super genius who is even more talented than Gong Chao. It took him only 40 years to reach such a level in the ancient world, and he has been in the skyscraping realm for less than 1 year. I guess he came to the Firmament Territory feast not long after reaching the skyscraping realm. He is definitely a much more talented genius than Gong Chao. The drill grounds were in shock and all stared at Jian Wushuang as if he was a monster. They imagined he might not be a human. Genius, exceptional genius or monster, these words were not enough to describe him. They could only think of two words, heaven-defying. A heaven-defying level genius. In the Skyward Pavilion, the experts who had come from all sects, although experienced and knowledgeable, were also speechless. Even Xianyi was surprised. He knew that Jian Wushuang was extraordinary, for he hadn't even gained an insight into Jian Wushuang. But he hadn't expected that his cultivation age was so short. Xianyi calmed down soon and looked at him happily. Nice, it's a worthy visit today. 3 experts who respectively represented the most 3 powerful sects sat in 3 rooms in the Skyward Pavilion. They paid little attention to Jian Wushuang as he came from the ancient world, even though Jian Wushuang had performed well. They had promised to give up these ancient world's geniuses to Xianyi at the very beginning. But now, the 3 of them felt deep remorse. Very deep. They knew that Jian Wushuang was more talented than Gong Chao. They had fought crazily for Gong Chao. How could they give up a heaven-defying genius who was better than Gong Chao to Xianyi? How stupid I am. Xianyi is a visionary. If these young men were ordinary, how could Xianyi pick them? The arrogant middle-aged man from the Immortal Dynasty was so regretful that he wanted to slap himself. Chapter 652, to renege on his own words. Chapter 652, to renege on his own words. Such a heaven-defying genius. The evil lady of the boundless demon sect looked passionately over at Jian Wushuang. He has such achievements in the ancient world within 40 years. From now on he will stay and cultivate in the eternal world. If enough cultivation resources and treasures are given, he will easily reach the eternal realm, even be a Tao master. Such a genius. But I have promised Mr. Xianyi. The evil young lady sighed. She was unwilling to do it. But she had promised Xianyi in front of so many experts in the Skyward Pavilion. To renege on her promise was humiliating. Besides, this was Xianyi to whom she had promised. She knew how terrifying Xianyi was, that was why she dared not to break her promise. Both the evil lady and the middle-aged man of the Immortal Dynasty were sorry to lose a super genius. However, Shi Qianhan, the black-haired elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard, didn't care too much. People on the drill grounds were amazed at Jian Wushuang's cultivation age. Suddenly a mighty power fell on the drill grounds. The drill grounds immediately quieted down. Geniuses on the drill ground shivered and dared not make any noise under the mighty power. As the mighty power spread, an elder appeared in the center of the drill grounds. It was a sage-like, black-haired and slurry-eyed elder. As soon as he appeared, all people on the ground turned to him, realizing where the mighty power came from. I'm Shi Qianhan, the 9th elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard. Shi Qianhan looked over at Jian Wushuang, said slowly, Jian Wushuang, I came personally to invite you to join the Cloud Sea Asgard. You will have equal access to the cultivation resources with Gong Chao. What do you think? Hearing that, Jian Wushuang was surprised. The Cloud Sea Asgard had never paid attention to him in the former rounds, even though he had performed well. He didn't expect that as soon as his cultivation age had been tested in the 4th round, Shi Qianhan would come in person to invite him. After all, he had only invited Gong Chao to join the Cloud Sea Asgard through sound transmission only. The drill grounds were in tumult. Apparently they also hadn't expected that Shi Qianhan would come in person and offer Jian Wushuang the same as Gong Chao. It was such a good offer that all of them were envious of the one who received it. Cloud Sea Asgard? Jian Wushuang remembered the information he had read about Cloud Sea Asgard. Cloud Sea Asgard was one of the 3 magnates. It was not that far-fetched to call it the most powerful sect in the Firmament Territory. Normally, the more powerful a sect was, the more cultivating resources and room to grow it had. Shi Qianhan's offer was tempting even for Jian Wushuang. However, before Jian Wushuang answered him, a cold voice sounded, Shi Qianhan, that's not a good idea. As the 9th elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard, you should not break your promise. Don't you feel ashamed of being laughed at by other sects? An arrogant man's voice followed. Then 2 figures appeared at Shi Qianhan's side at once. They were the arrogant man of the Immortal Dynasty and the evil lady of the boundless demon sect. Shi Qianhan, I have heard that you're not a man of decency. You really aren't. Don't you feel embarrassed? The evil lady sneered at him. It's none of your business. Shi Qianhan said in a cold voice. Yes, but you have to ask Xian Yi first. The evil young lady said with a deep voice. Immediately another figure appeared at Shi Qianhan's side. This was Xian Yi, a purple-robed gentleman with sword-shaped eyebrows. Shi Qianhan's face fell after seeing Xian Yi, then he said with a smile, Xian Yi, I promised to give Jian Wushuang up to you without knowing he was an exceptional genius. But now, he is so special that I cannot give him up to you. By the way, such an exceptional genius should have the right to decide himself which sect to join. Don't you think? Shi Qianhan had made up grand reasons for himself, but experts in the Skyward Pavilion all had contempt for his behavior. He had not spared a glance at Jian Wushuang before. Therefore, when Xian Yi said he wanted those young men of the ancient worlds, Shi Qianhan agreed not to fight him without hesitation. Now, after knowing Jian Wushuang's real strength, he regretted this and changed his mind at once. Such a shameless person. Hearing what Shi Qianhan had said, Xian Yi's expression didn't change at all. He took a glance at Shi Qianhan and nodded. You're right, such an exceptional genius surely has the right to decide for himself, Xian Yi said. People around were all astonished at the unexpected words. They thought Xian Yi would be angry, but didn't expect that he was so easily persuaded. Jian Wushuang. Xian Yi looked over at Jian Wushuang. Master Xian Yi. Jian Wushuang bowed to Xian Yi. Xian Yi was the first Eternal Realm expert in the Firmament territory and he had given Jian Wushuang the token at the beginning of round 3. Therefore Jian Wushuang respected him. Before he had shown his real strength, no one but Xian Yi befriended and sent him an invitation. That alone had made Jian Wushuang favor Xian Yi. You have heard what was said. Xian Yi smiled slightly. Your talent is high. The Cloud Sea Asgard wants you and has promised you a lot. It's a good opportunity for you to take a second to consider. The Ancient Sect. Chapter 653 Xian Yi's Sword. Chapter 653, Xian Yi's Sword. Xian Yi paused and then he continued, I promised you that you would become an inner disciple of the Ancient Sect at the end of round 3. This has not changed. In the Ancient Sect, no matter what you want, you have to fight for it yourself. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Shi Qianhan. Xian Yi looked at Shi Qianhan and said in a cold voice, You have promised him a lot. But if his growth in the Cloud Sea Asgard doesn't meet your expectations, I'm afraid you will not keep your promise, right? This? Shi Qianhan's eyes froze a little. In the Cloud Sea Asgard, there were many disciples and the competition between them was stiff. Everything depended on strength. He had promised Jian Wushuang a lot. But if Jian Wushuang didn't perform well in the Cloud Sea Asgard, to not waste the resources, the Cloud Sea Asgard would certainly not keep their promise. Humph. Xian Yi snorted, then he turned to Jian Wushuang, said, Young man, people in the Firmament territory know who I am. If I bring you back to the Ancient Sect, I will try my best to support you and improve your strength to a higher level even if your potential is exhausted. It is what I can promise you, and this is also what the Ancient Sect can promise you. The Ancient Sect will never give up on any of its disciples no matter how weak his strength or talent is. The words reverberated through the whole battlefield and inspired all those present. His promise was much more sincere than Shi Qianhan's. Jian Wushuang was also moved. Turning to Shi Qianhan, he was clear at a glance. Although he promised me a lot, I could only get them based on improvement in strength, which means that I have to fight for it by myself. It's the same with what the Ancient Sect has promised me. Compared with Shi Qianhan, Master Xian Yi is much more sincere. The Ancient Sect will never give up on any of its disciples. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and made a decision. Then he raised his head. Master Xian Yi, I have decided to join the Ancient Sect. Jian Wushuang said earnestly. Then he turned to Shi Qianhan and said, I'm sorry, Elder Shi. Your offer is tempting. But Master Xian Yi had invited me at the end of round 3, I cannot refuse him. Xian Yi smiled slightly, it seemed he had already expected this result. But Shi Qianhan became angry as a hint of cruelty flashed in his eyes. Young man, think about it carefully. As the most powerful sect in the Firmament territory, the Cloud Sea Asgard has the most resources. What's more, you have just come to the Eternal World, I'm afraid you are not aware of the danger here. It's easy to be killed without the protection of a powerful sect. In the Firmament territory, only the Cloud Sea Asgard can protect you from being killed by others. Take this seriously. Shi Qianhan spat out the last sentence. Hearing that, many geniuses on the drill grounds and experts in the skyward pavilion frowned. They were aware that Shi Qianhan was hinting at something. It was more like a threat. Yes, it was a threat. He threatened that if Jian Wushuang didn't join the Cloud Sea Asgard, the Cloud Sea Asgard would become his enemy and kill him one day. Jian Wushuang was sullen. Having experienced so much in the ancient world, he understood what Shi Qianhan was saying. He looked over at Xian Yi. This was the someone he had to depend on. Shi Qianhan. Xian Yi's calm and cold voice arose. What? Did I say something wrong? Shi Qianhan glanced at Xian Yi, being high-handed as the 9th elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard, the most powerful sect in the firmament territory. No, you're right. Xian Yi nodded slightly. The eternal world is a dangerous place. So you agree with me? Shi Qianhan said with a cold smile. But suddenly his smile froze. He saw a sparkling sword light heading towards him. An ice-cold and dazzling sword light. Everyone's attention was caught by it as soon as it appeared. They couldn't help staring at it. Then the sword light moved fast. So fast. So fast as if it had gone beyond the limit of time and space. At an incredible speed. Facing the unexpected attack, all of them were astonished. Xian Yi. Shi Qianhan was panic-stricken. He had never expected that Xian Yi, who was calm and nice just now, would suddenly attack him with such a terrible killing move. It was too fast. Geniuses on the drill grounds, including Jian Wushuang and Gong Chao, couldn't see it clearly. Even the top divine realm experts in the skyward pavilion couldn't do it. Only a few of the eternal realm experts present could do this, but they still couldn't follow it. Such as Shi Qianhan. As the sword approached, Shi Qianhan couldn't even defend against it. He could only cry out. Whoosh! The dazzling sword light passed through. Shi Qianhan's body was cut in half like a piece of paper. Although they had not yet figured out how the sword moved, they saw clearly at the next moment that Shi Qianhan, the 9th elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard, had already been cut in half. Chapter 654. A Man Can't Be Offended. Chapter 654. A Man Can't Be Offended. Silence. The huge drill ground was in silence. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Many geniuses on the drill ground and experts in the skyward pavilion gazed upon this scene in awe. Did he die? Jian Wushuang's eyes were fixed in a blank stare. As an elder of the Cloud Sea Asgard, Shi Qianhan was an eternal realm expert. Experts like him were masters in the firmament territory. However, Xian Yi cut him in half with one strike of his sword. That strike. It haunted in Jian Wushuang's memory. A swift and frightening strike. It had been too fast and too terrifying. Among all the geniuses present, Jian Wushuang's cultivated the principle of the sword more than the others. But even he couldn't comprehend the blow from that sword. He just felt it was too powerful. Right then. Xian Yi. An angry voice called out. It was Shi Qianhan. What? Many of the geniuses on the drill ground had become frantic. Their hair stood on end seeing Shi Qianhan's body cut in half. His upper half rose into the air, his face flamed with anger and his eyes fixed on Xian Yi. How could it be possible? Jian Wushuang was stunned. How could he survive being cut in half? I heard that the eternal realm expert would continue to live as long as his life core was unbroken. It seems it's true. The geniuses of the eternal world recalled. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang felt overwhelmed. Life core. As long as the life core remained intact, he would live. Jian Wushuang looked around, seeing that the experts who were walking out of the skyward pavilion didn't seem surprised. Apparently they knew Shi Qianhan was not dead. But they were still shocked. Few of them had seen Xian Yi fight before. They were shocked by his strength. Xian Yi, how dare you? Shi Qianhan's face twisted and he stared at Xian Yi with hatred in his eyes. Suddenly, whoosh! A ghost-like figure appeared in front of him no less than a meter away. It was Xian Yi. His face had changed from a soft gaze to an ice-cold stare. Anyone who met his stare would start to shiver uncontrollably. Shi Qianhan. Xian Yi called him, his voice heavy with the intent of killing Shi Qianhan. Shi Qianhan's eyes were wide open and filled with fear. Terrified. The terror flooded Shi Qianhan's mind. He felt Xian Yi held his life in his hands. I agree with you. The eternal world is dangerous. Xian Yi said calmly. Huh? Shi Qianhan looked in horror at Xian Yi. He couldn't understand why he said that. In the dangerous world, it is not only Jian Wushuang but you also need to be careful. In the eternal world, even in the firmament territory, there are many people that could kill you. Xian Yi said in a cold voice. How dare you? Shi Qianhan gazed at Xian Yi, his eyes conveying both fear and anger. Xian Yi grinned a gruesome smile like a sharp knife. Then he moved forward, whispered in Shi Qianhan's ear, Shi Qianhan, ask your palace master whether or not I dare to kill you, what he does if I do kill you. Make sure he understands. Tell him, I will kill any of the Cloud Sea Asgard that threatens a disciple of the ancient sect. Tell him everything. Shi Qianhan gulped, his fear had intensified and a cold sweat had broken out on his forehead. The elder of the Immortal Dynasty and the evil lady of the Boundless Demon Sect looked pitifully at Shi Qianhan as if he was a fool. Foolish. How dare he threaten Jian Wushuang in front of Xian Yi? Does he really think Xian Yi is a pushover? The elder of the Immortal Dynasty sneered. He really thought the Cloud Sea Asgard was the most powerful sect in the firmament territory. How reckless he is to offend Xian Yi in public. Usually Xian Yi is nice and easygoing. Usually. But if he got angry he would definitely launch a massacre. I have not seen it with my own eyes, though I have heard tales of it. When Xian Yi made waves in the firmament territory, the palace master of the Cloud Sea Asgard had not yet been born. The evil lady of the Boundless Demon Sect also sneered. They were smarter than Shi Qianhan. They knew that the person in the firmament territory couldn't be offended. Long ago their sect masters had warned them that two people in the ancient sect couldn't be offended. One was the ancient sect's master. The other one was Xian Yi. They were told that the ancient sect was a special sect inside the firmament territory and Xian Yi was the special one in the ancient sect. Therefore they dared not offend Xian Yi. However, in his stupidity Shi Qianhan had done so today. The drill ground was silent. Everybody on the ground looked on in shock. Shi Qianhan did not dare say another word, fearing that Xian Yi would kill him. Because Xian Yi could easily do so. Jian Wushuang. Xian Yi softened his demeanor and looked at Jian Wushuang. He said softly, don't worry. As you're a disciple of the ancient sect, they will protect you. No one will hurt you unless the ancient sect gets destroyed. Chapter 655, The Ending. Chapter 655, The Ending. Finally Jian Wushuang still chose to join the ancient sect. The experts were not surprised about his decision, but Shi Qianhan was humiliated and lost all face. Perhaps the Cloud Sea Asgard was indeed very strong, but Shi Qianhan relied only on this to compete with Xian Yi, which was pretty ridiculous. In the fourth round, the cultivation ages were still being checked. Numerous geniuses received their results and some of the cultivation ages were also very short, but still Jian Wushuang was vastly superior to the others. Soon, all the geniuses finished the examination and the last round of the genius battle was completely over. The firmament territory feast, which was held every 3,000 years and attracted numerous sects in the firmament territory, was finally finished. Next, most of the geniuses chose to join their own sects. Jian Wushuang, Feng Huaying and the other geniuses who were from the ancient world all became the disciples of the ancient sect. Jian Wushuang. A figure appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Gong Chao. Jian Wushuang looked at him. You really have good talent, I am looking forward to fighting with you, Gong Chao said. Me too. Jian Wushuang slightly smiled. In this firmament territory feast, Gong Chao was at the top based on his strength, but Jian Wushuang was the best according to talent. No rush, you two definitely can compete one day. A gentle man in a purple robe walked towards them. Xian Yi Lord. Jian Wushuang and Gong Chao both bowed to him. Although Gong Chao didn't join the ancient sect, he respected Xian Yi, who was the number one in the firmament territory of the Eternal Realm. Soon, there will be an exchange between the ancient sect and the Cloud Sea Asgard. You two can compete at that moment, Xian Yi answered with a smile. Really? Jian Wushuang and Gong Chao both raised their eyebrows. I'm waiting for you to challenge me, Gong Chao said. Trust me, I won't disappoint you. Jian Wushuang slightly smiled. After that, Gong Chao went to Cloud Sea Asgard with Shi Qianhan, who had already recovered. You six, follow me to the ancient sect. Xian Yi waved. Jian Wushuang, Feng and the other people quickly looked at each other and then followed. On the way to the ancient sect, they all had a hint of anticipation. They wanted to know, as one of the top sects, what unique features it had to surpass the other three powerhouses in the firmament territory. Following Xian Yi for 2 days, the 6 people finally arrived at the ancient sect. The firmament territory was very vast. The ancient sect, as one of the top sects there, was located in a huge and ancient mountain range. This mountain range with countless alpine jungles stretched for thousands of miles, and the ancient sect was in its center. Above the void, Jian, Wushuang, Feng, Huaying, Bingshan, Xianing and Wuhuang were floating patiently. They all respectfully stared at the giant and ancient sect which was in front of them. This old sect was under the protection of a huge formation. The formation was mysterious and powerful. Inside the sect, there were many giant mountains, and in the valleys between the mountains, there were a large number of palaces and pavilions. Magnificent and huge. At the same time, its ancient aura was overflowing as well. The spiritual power here. Jian Wushuang looked around and realized the heaven and earth spiritual energy in this void was much more powerful than the other places in the eternal world. Not only the heaven and earth spiritual energy, but also the origin energy was stronger than any other place. That's the ancient sect. Not to mention others, its location is already superior to other places. Jian Wushuang admired this deeply. "Follow me," Xian said, and then he went straight to the interior of the sect. The experts within all expected and knew Xian, so they didn't activate the huge formation when they saw him. When Jian Wushuang and the others followed Xian to enter the ancient sect, they kept looking around and could sense a tremendous aura nearby. "You 6 just arrived here, but you all will cultivate here, so I will tell you our rules and some news about the ancient sect," Xian said. Jian Wushuang and the others listened carefully. "You must have already received some information about the unique features of our ancient sect. Although we ancient sect is only one of the top sects in the firmament territory, we are much better than the other 3 powerhouses, especially in training our disciples. Now I can't tell you why, but you will know about it when the time is right," Xian said. "Let me tell you some details about the internal situation of the ancient sect now. In the ancient sect, we have plenty of cultivation resources, which includes 1 mountain and 3 palaces. 1 mountain and 3 palaces? Jian Wushuang was confused. These 1 mountain and 3 palaces are related to the foundation of the ancient sect. "Let me show you the mountain first," Xian said. Soon they reached a huge giant mountain. Inside the ancient sect, there were hundreds of similar giant mountains, but this one in front of them was totally covered by a huge formation. This gave one the feeling of extreme mystery. This giant mountain? Jian Wushuang frowned and stared at it. He felt so familiar with it. "This giant mountain is called Enlightenment Mountain," Xian said. "Enlightenment Mountain?" Jian Wushuang, Feng and the others were shocked. Before, in the second round of the genius battle, the geniuses had already known about the Enlightenment Mountain and had stayed there for 1 full month. They also had spent 1 month there, so they were all familiar with the name. The characteristics of this Enlightenment Mountain are the same as the one that you stayed in the Firmament Territory feast. "After all, that one simulates ours," Xian said with a smile. "That's it." Jian Wushuang, Feng and the others suddenly understood. "You all stayed and cultivated Dao in the Enlightenment Mountain before, so you should know that the cultivation speed inside it is twice as fast compared to the outside. However, the speed here is at least 3 times faster," Xian said. Chapter 656, 3 Palaces in the Ancient Sect, Part 1. Chapter 656, 3 Palaces in the Ancient Sect, Part 1. On hearing this, Jian Wushuang's, Feng's and the others' eyes lit up. They knew how useful it was, as they had previously stayed in the Enlightenment Mountain for 1 month. Especially Jian Wushuang, he had obtained a significant improvement during that month. But now cultivating here could be 2 times faster than before, which was even more effective. "Don't be too excited now." When Xian saw these 6 excited faces, he smiled and said, "Although the effect of cultivating in this Enlightenment Mountain is much better, not everyone can meditate here. In the ancient sect, only the inner disciples are qualified to cultivate in it." "Only for the inner disciples?" Bingshan, Xianing and Wuhuang suddenly felt a bit lost and disappointed. These 3 were outer disciples, so they couldn't get into the Enlightenment Mountain. Only Jian Wushuang, Feng and Huaying were able to cultivate inside. Jian Wushuang, Feng, Huaying. Xianing looked at them. "You 3 are our inner disciples, so you can cultivate here. There are 36 cave mansions in the Enlightenment Mountain and 33 of them are occupied, so you guys can pick those 3. "Yes." Feng and Huaying nodded immediately. "There are 36 cave mansions in this Enlightenment Mountain?" Jian Wushuang frowned and asked, Xianyi Lord, you just mentioned that as long as they are inner disciples they can cultivate in it. But there are only 36 cave mansions, so, are there only 36 inner disciples in the ancient sect? You are already one of our disciples, so you don't need to call me Xianyi Lord. The disciples here call me Xianyi Palace Master and you can follow them. Xianyi mentioned a side point and continued, you are right. We only have 36 inner disciples and that's already a lot. By the way, there are no more than 36 inner disciples in the ancient sect. Why is it? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. The sects with strong strength in the ancient world always took millions of disciples. The ancient sect as a top sect which only ranked behind the three magnates in the firmament territory, should have taken on a large number of disciples. Only 36 inner disciples sounded like this was really too few. We only can accept 36 people to meditate and cultivate in the Enlightenment Mountain at once, and also we want to encourage the inner disciples to compete, so that's why we only have 36, Xianyi patiently explained. In the ancient sect, the inner disciples and the outer disciples can all fight for the cultivation resource. There is a competition every 10 years here for our disciples. Every time, some of the inner disciples who are not good enough would be replaced by the outer disciples. After all, there are only 36 inner disciples but numerous outer disciples. Some of the outer disciples are real geniuses, and some were inner disciples before, so their strength is also very strong. Every sect competition, some inner disciples whose strength are weaker would be challenged by the outer disciples, but only a couple of them could withstand it. That's it. Jian Wushuang and the others all understood. The sect competition which was held every 10 years could decide the identity of disciples based on their strength, that indeed enhanced the competition between the outer and inner disciples. As long as the outer disciples could have a fast improvement and strong strength, they could also become inner disciples. Likewise, if the inner disciples were defeated, they would become outer disciples. At the previous sect competition which was held 8 years ago, the next one will be in 2 years. Jian Wushuang, Feng and Huaying, since you three just got here, your strength is weaker than the other inner disciples or even some outer disciples. Therefore, during these 2 years, you need to work really hard to keep your identity, Xianyi said with a mysterious smile. On hearing this, Jian Wushuang, Feng and Huaying all felt a hint of pressure. In 2 years, the sect competition would start again. Since they just joined the ancient sect, their strength was at the bottom, it was really not easy for them to remain inner disciples. However, you don't need to worry too much. Since you are new here, you definitely will get a big improvement with the resources of the ancient sect. Besides, even if you become an outer disciple in 2 years, you can get it back in the next sect competition. It is held every 10 years. 10 years will pass pretty fast, Xianyi said and smiled. Even though Xianyi tried to make them relax, they three were still nervous about it. Okay, so let me tell you the details about the 3 palaces in the ancient sect, Xianyi continued. These 3 palaces are Dao Palace, Sword Palace and Divine Palace. Dao Palace is to cultivate Dao. There are 13 palace masters in the Dao Palace and all of them are experts who had comprehended a super high-level Dao in the Eternal Realm. Other than that, there are numerous Vice Palace masters who are superior Divine Realm experts, so they also have a good comprehension of Dao. The Palace Masters and Vice Palace Masters always gather in the Dao Palace and record their insights and opportunities which can be obtained by our disciples. You also can go to listen to their lectures and even choose to join their sects and become their disciples. Usually the disciples here all join one sect of the Palace Masters or Vice Palace Masters. Some experts even join 2 or 3 at the same time. The Masters there will guide you and help you to apply necessary natural treasures while you are cultivating. Jian Wushuang and the others were all surprised. Almost all the disciples of the ancient sect joined the sects of the Palace Masters or Vice Palace Masters in the Dao Palace. You just got here, so it would be better for you to choose the right masters, join their sects and become their disciples. Even though you can only be a nominal disciple, it would be much better than for you to cultivate by yourself without any guide, Xianyi said. Chapter 657, 3 Palaces in the Ancient Sect, Part 2. Chapter 657, 3 Palaces in the Ancient Sect, Part 2. Jian Wushuang, Feng and Huaying all agreed with Xianyi. They had just arrived at the Eternal World and met experts from a higher level. Although they knew that the Divine Realm, Eternal Realm and even Dao Master were above the skyscraping realm, they didn't know how to progress after that at all. It would be much better and easier to have an expert to guide them. Xianyi continued. Apart from the Tao Palace, the Sword Palace and the Divine Palace are also in the ancient sect. Sword Palace, as its name, is for people to cultivate the sword principle. It is also very unique in the ancient sect. All the warriors who are good at longsword Tao cultivate in the Sword Palace. However, there are only one Palace Master and two Vice Palace Masters in it. The two Vice Palace Masters are Eternal Realm experts who are good at longsword Tao, and the Palace Master. Xian Yi smiled mysteriously and said, "I'm the Palace Master in the Sword Palace." On hearing that, Jian Wushuang and the other people were not surprised. In the Firmament Territory Feast, Xian Yi divided Shi Qianhan into two parts with his swordsmanship. That showed how good he was at sword principle. Besides, he was also acknowledged as the #1 Eternal Realm in the Firmament Territory, so he was the most appropriate person to be the Palace Master in the Sword Palace. As for the Divine Palace, Xian Yi hesitated for a moment and continued, "It gathered numerous Divine Realm warriors in the ancient sect. There is a rule in our sect. The disciples can be in the ancient sect for no more than 500 years. Anyone who is here more than that, they can't have the same treatment as our disciples, which means they can't cultivate in the Tao Palace and the Sword Palace, and also can't stay in the Enlightenment Mountain. The only place that they can go is the Divine Palace. Inside the Divine Palace, there are lots of dangerous tasks that are assigned by the ancient sect and the Divine Realm experts who represent our ancient sect to fight to the death outside. You can think about it like this. The ancient sect will train you for the first 500 years, after that you need to contribute to us." The 6 people all nodded slightly. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Since they chose to join the sect and use its resources, then when their strength was strong enough, they should contribute to the sect. Xian Yi Palace Master. A black-clothed elder popped up in the void and bowed respectfully to Xian Yi, then he looked at Jian Wushuang and the other people. These should be the 6 geniuses that Xian Yi Palace Master took from the Firmament Territory Feast. Give me the tokens," Xian Yi said. The black-clothed elder immediately gave 6 tokens to Xian Yi and then Xian Yi gave one to each of the 6 people. "This is your ID token. Of course, the outer disciples and the inner disciples are different," Xian Yi said. Jian Wushuang and the others took it. Without hesitation they refined their own tokens. "Daoyin, these kids just arrived at the ancient sect so they are new here. I've explained the Enlightenment Mountain and 3 palaces to them, so please take them to look around the place," Xian Yi ordered. "Yes." The black-clothed elder Daoyin nodded respectfully. "Jian Wushuang, you stay here and the other 5 follow him," Xian Yi said. Immediately, Feng Huaying and the others left with Daoyin, but Jian Wushuang still stood in front of Xian Yi. "Jian Wushuang, among these 6, you are the only one who is good at longsword Tao and whose talent is the best. Follow me and I can show you the Sword Palace," Xian Yi said. Sword Palace. Jian Wushuang was excited and instantly followed Xian Yi. Soon after, Jian Wushuang arrived at the Sword Palace. It was gigantic and was like a giant island standing on the ground. There were hundreds of buildings on it. The tremendous sword essence also shocked Jian Wushuang a lot. Outside the Sword Palace, there were lots of experts patrolling. Obviously, these experts were all Divine Realm experts and they all had auras that really terrified Jian Wushuang. In the Eternal World, the skyscraping realm was at the top level, so there were thousands of Divine Realm experts here. However, the ancient sect, which was a top sect here, would obviously gather more Divine Realm experts. When Xian Yi appeared outside the Sword Palace, the Divine Realm experts who were patrolling here immediately bowed to him and called him Xian Yi Palace Master. "Jian Wushuang, your gift in sword principle is extremely high. Inside the Sword Palace, lots of sword principle experts record their insight. It will be very useful for you. Later, you can come here more often to meditate," Xian Yi said patiently. "Yes." Jian Wushuang nodded. Soon, they both stepped on a several-foot-wide flagstone road which headed towards the front door of the Sword Palace. On the front door there were 2 grand characters, Sword Palace. Those 2 characters spread powerful sword essence which covered the whole Sword Palace and then flew to the sky. Even the numerous layers of space couldn't stop it. Jian Wushuang was stunned. It was the most terrifying sword essence that he had seen. Jian Wushuang looked at Xian Yi and noticed that Xian Yi was unfathomable. He couldn't help suspecting that these 2 characters were written by Xian Yi. Walking along the flagstone road and coming to the front of the Sword Palace, Xian Yi stopped and looked at Jian Wushuang. "Little kid, you are so lucky today. One of our Vice Palace Masters is having a lecture now. You can go listen. I will just take you up to here." "Thanks, Xian Yi Palace Master," Jian Wushuang replied politely, then he took a deep breath and went into the sword palace. Xianyi was still outside the front door. When he saw Jian Wushuang completely disappear, swoosh, a figure unexpectedly appeared beside him. This person looked exactly the same as Xianyi, even the manner and temperament were completely the same. He was also very gentle. The only difference was one was in a purple robe but one was in a white robe. The people who knew him would know that Xianyi had cultivated the doppelganger secret skill. Obviously, the one who took part in the Firmament Territory feast and brought Jian Wushuang and the others back to the ancient sect was his doppelganger. As for the original body, he hadn't gone out at all. He had been staying in the sword palace the whole time. The white-robed Xianyi who just popped up was his original body. You really got a great little kid for me this time. The strongest sword soul, I haven't met this for a long time. The white-robed Xianyi smiled gently and the purple-robed Xianyi beside him also smiled slightly. The purple-robed Xianyi was only the doppelganger, so even though he observed Jian Wushuang showing his technique, he still couldn't fully appreciate his strength. But the white-robed Xianyi, as the original body, without seeing Jian Wushuang's technique, only looked at him once and then already knew Jian Wushuang had the strongest sword soul. Chapter 658, Sword Palace. Chapter 658, Sword Palace. After stepping inside Sword Palace, Jian Wushuang quickly arrived at a huge martial arts practice field where there were lots of people seated with their legs crossed. At first glance, there seemed to be hundreds of people. All of them were sitting with their legs crossed, listening silently to the lecture delivered by the young man at the top of the platform. The young man looked rather pale and his voice sounded somewhat weak as if he got ill very often. However, such a sickly man himself exuded a sort of frightful sword essence which could easily destroy Jian Wushuang. It suddenly struck Jian Wushuang that this sickly young man was actually one of the two vice palace masters in Sword Palace, and he was currently giving a lecture. Jian Wushuang immediately found a place to sit down. He dared not make a sound and listened carefully. The vice palace master was telling them some of his experiences related to sword principle, as well as dilemmas people might run across and their solutions. Jian Wushuang grew increasingly fascinated. As time went by, half a day passed in the twinkling of an eye. As his lecture was coming to an end, the vice palace master suddenly stood up and executed a simple move on the platform. The sword swing did not any ups or downs, it was a plain move that left the space it passed through similarly undisturbed. On the surface, the movement of his sword looked like it completely lacked strength. However, as soon as the vice palace master finished, an ear-piercing noise burst from where the long sword chopped and an unprecedented sword essence surged out from that empty area. Since almost all the people who attended lectures at martial arts practice field were good at exploring sword principle and had high attainment in it, they were all amazed at what they saw and a few of them were even somewhat inspired. Like Jian Wushuang, he had a remarkable aptitude for sword principle and was currently in the heaven-treading realm. This movement evoked a strong feeling inside of him. Immediately closing his eyes without leaving the martial arts practice field, he began meditating, remaining there for a whole hour before he opened his eyes. Phew! Jian Wushuang relaxed as a smile grew on his face. Speaking of excellent moves, the movement of the vice palace master was no match for the move that Xianyi used to split Shi Qianhan in two, but the move Xianyi used was too quick to catch up with while the movement of this vice palace master. Jian Wushuang recalled the movement just now. Apparently, this vice palace master had controlled the speed so that everyone could see it clearly and be truly inspired. People like Jian Wushuang benefited a lot. Most of the people at martial arts practice field had also benefited a lot. Right then. Haha, I figured it out. A voice full of surprise sounded throughout the martial arts practice field. All of the people at martial arts practice field immediately looked at the direction of the sound and they found a slightly fat bald teenager who looked simple and honest laughing out loud. Figured it out? Jian Wushuang frowned. What did you figure out? The bald teenager went straight before the vice palace master while ignoring the stares of everyone around him. Vice palace master Nye, I fully comprehended the first sword scar, the bald teenager said respectfully. Vice palace master Nye raised his eyebrows. However, his appearance seemed to cause a stir at martial arts practice field. Everyone looked slightly surprised. The first sword scar? Jian Wushuang was confused. Show us your talent, Vice Palace Master Nye said. Okay. The bald teenager nodded and immediately began to practice his sword at martial arts practice field. Look, it's the first move. The bald teenager quickly displayed his move. The first attack dashed forward, accompanied by a lightning speed sword light that easily penetrated the space in front of him. This is the second sword. The second sword attack was released, leaving behind the impression of a vast and endless void. This is the third sword. When the third sword attack was released, it demonstrated great vigor and even violence. Look, it's the fourth move. The fifth move. The sword attacks continued on, with each move giving off a completely different prospect. The ninth move. The bald teenager spoke again as the ninth move was released, causing the whole area to tremble. After all 9 moves were finished, the bald teenager stopped. Up on the high platform, Vice Palace Master Nye witnessed the swordsmanship of the bald teenager. As soon as the 9 moves were finished, he nodded, smiled and said, "Not bad. Since you've finished the 9 moves, that means you've comprehended the first sword scar. From now on, you're qualified to attend the Palace Master's lectures at Sword Tower." "Thank you, Vice Palace Master Nye." The bald teenager looked surprised. The other sword principal on the drill ground looked at the bald teenager enviously. However, Jian Wushuang grew even more baffled. Since the man just displayed the 9 moves, demonstrating that he's comprehended the first sword scar, he was now eligible to attend lectures delivered by Palace Masters? Isn't anyone else qualified to go to the Sword Tower? Jian Wushuang murmured. Before long, the sword principal warriors on the martial arts practice field left along with Vice Palace Master Nye. The bald teenager who just performed the sword move also got up and was about to leave. "Hey, senior brother." Jian Wushuang walked towards the bald teenager. The bald teenager frowned when he saw Jian Wushuang. "Skyscraping realm? And I haven't seen you before?" In the ancient sect, the ordinary disciples were mostly at the level of a divine realm expert, but a few of them were only in the skyscraping realm. "Who are you?" the bald teenager asked. "I'm Jian Wushuang." Jian Wushuang introduced himself. "Jian Wushuang? I haven't heard of you. You must have just joined the ancient sect, right?" the bald teenager asked. "You're right." Jian Wushuang nodded. "No wonder," the bald teenager shrugged. "I'm Zhu Lai, an outer disciple. What about you? Are you an outer disciple or?" "I was lucky enough to gain a place as an inner disciple at Firmament Territory Feast," Jian Wushuang said and smiled. "Inner disciple?" Zhu Lai paused for a while and soon a smile grew full of his face. "That means your senior brother Jian Wushuang. I pay my respects." "Senior brother?" Jian Wushuang also paused for a moment as he had just called Zhu Lai senior brother, but now Zhu Lai was calling him senior brother instead. "You don't know about this, senior brother? No matter how long you stay at the ancient sect, only your strength and status matter. Generally, the outer disciple will call the inner disciple's senior brother," said Zhu Lai. "That's it." Jian Wushuang didn't know how to react. Chapter 659, 3 Sword Scars. Chapter 659, 3 Sword Scars. "I just arrived at the ancient sect and this is my first time inside the Sword Palace, so I don't know about anything. Would you mind telling me what this is all about?" Jian Wushuang asked. "Sure," Zhu Lai briskly replied. "Actually, the Sword Palace is a place where numerous disciples in the ancient sect explore sword principle. There are 2 Vice Palace Masters and 1 Palace Master who usually give public lectures at martial arts practice field. Sometimes they even show us their swordsmanship. Today happens to be a day when Vice Palace Master Nye gives his lectures. The Palace Master of Sword Palace, Palace Master Xian Yi, who has a very powerful cultivation in sword principle that has already reached great heights, also occasionally give lectures. However, if you want to attend his lectures, you must meet certain requirements. Senior brother, please follow me." Zhu Lai led Jian Wushuang and they quickly reached a huge pavilion inside Sword Palace. "This is Sword Tower, it's where Palace Master Xian Yi gives lectures," said Zhu Lai. Jian Wushuang looked up at the huge pavilion before him and secretly nodded. "Senior brother, look here," Zhu Lai pointed towards a dark stone tablet in front of the pavilion. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at the stone tablet and his expression changed abruptly. He immediately noticed that there were 3 distinct sword scars on the dark stone tablet. These 3 sword scars were deeply engraved, placed together from top to bottom. Jian Wushuang looked at these 3 sword scars and his pupils suddenly shrunk. He realized that these 3 sword scars were profoundly delicate. "What are the sword scars for?" Jian Wushuang asked. I just said that there are some requirements for attending the lectures of Palace Master Xian Yi, and the requirement is related to the 3 sword scars which were placed here by Palace Master Xian Yi. The rules, which were set by Palace Master Xian Yi, are that only disciples in the ancient sect who can fully comprehend the first sword scar are qualified to attend his lectures in Sword Tower, said Zhu Lai. And anyone who is able to fully comprehend the second sword scar is qualified to be apprenticed to Palace Master Xian Yi as his nominal disciple. If you fully comprehend the third sword scar, you can be his personal disciple. Jian Wushuang's expression turned odd when Zhu Lai said that. As long as I fully comprehend the third sword scar, I can be his personal disciple. Is it difficult? Jian Wushuang asked. It's far more than just difficult. Zhu Lai commented emotionally, I regard myself as being gifted in sword principle. However, it's been more than 10 years since I came to the ancient sect and entered Sword Palace. I've meditated on the 3 sword scars from the very beginning until now, but I've only just now fully comprehended the first sword scar. Isn't it difficult? Also, the first sword scar is the easiest while the second and third are much harder to meditate on. It's said that just the second sword scar is 10 times harder than the first one. Really? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. It's because of its difficulty that there are less than 20 disciples who are qualified to attend his lectures, and there are only 3 nominal disciples who have fully comprehend the second sword scar and become apprenticed to Palace Master Xian Yi. They have all stayed at Sword Palace for hundreds of years, comprehending the sword scars and attending the lectures of Palace Master Xian Yi. Zhu Lai said. Even though I've fully comprehended the first sword scar, I don't know how long it will take me to comprehend the second. After hearing that, Jian Wushuang remained silent for a while and then asked, since the second sword scar is so difficult, how about the third one? It's even more difficult, Zhu Lai said. Anyone who comprehends the third sword scar can be the personal disciple of Palace Master Xian Yi. But, apparently, it's not that easy to be his personal disciple with his strength. As far as I know, he still does not have a personal disciple in the ancient sect. Jian Wushuang frowned. In the ancient sect there were so many disciples, most of who were geniuses of sword principle, but no one among them could meet the requirement set by Palace Master Xian Yi and comprehend the 3 sword scars. This obviously demonstrated how difficult it was to comprehend the 3 sword scars. Senior brother. Other than Sword Tower, there is one more sword pavilion in Sword Palace, where plenty of sword principle experts have left behind their experiences. Some of the experts even created secret skills related to sword principle. You can go and have a look. Besides, I heard that there is also a sword mountain in Sword Palace, but it's just hearsay as I've never been there, Zhu Lai said. I see. Thank you so much, Jian Wushuang replied. You're welcome, senior brother. I'm off now if you don't mind, Zhu Lai said. Right. Jian Wushuang nodded. Once Zhu Lai left, Jian Wushuang sat down in front of the dark stone tablet. Various sword principle geniuses have been stuck on these 3 sword scars from Palace Master Xian Yi. Let me see how unique they are. With some expectations, Jian Wushuang began carefully meditating on the 3 sword scars. Jian Wushuang started by looking over the first of the 3 sword scars, the one which Zhu Lai had comprehended. Even if the first sword scar was the most common one, Jian Wushuang still felt it was obscure. Jian Wushuang meditated on it carefully after calming himself down. A moment later he discovered something. This sword scar. Jian Wushuang continued staring at the sword scar as his expression became increasingly grim. Clearly it's just a sword scar, but it contains 9 different sword essences. If these 9 sword essences are separated, you'll get 9 different sword movements. It immediately reminded Jian Wushuang of the 9 sword moves that Zhu Lai had performed in front of Vice Palace Master Nye. Zhu Lai had fully comprehended the first sword scar, which meant he had fully grasped the 9 sword movements included in the sword scar and performed them. It was easy to say, but each of the 9 sword movements was so intriguing that people had to spend a very long time exploring them. It is no wonder that Zhu Lai spent dozens of years to comprehend the 9 sword movements. As there are 9 different sword movements, even I would spend a long time if I meditated on them one by one. Jian Wushuang said silently. At this point, Jian Wushuang looked over the second and third sword scar. Jian Wushuang frowned as he gazed at them. The second and third sword scar look exactly the same as the first sword scar. Jian Wushuang's heart sank. Chapter 660 Numerous Geniuses. Chapter 660 Numerous Geniuses. The 3 sword scars looked exactly the same, and even the 9 sword movements were all the same. However, Jian Wushuang realized that every one of the 3 sword scars had its occult level. The reason why he couldn't figure it out was that he only saw 3 similar sword scars, but the truth was that his cultivation in sword principle was not extensive enough. Palace Master Xian Yi has created a real challenge. There are so many disciples of sword principle in the ancient sect, but it seems true that none of them have been able to fully comprehend the 3 sword scars. I wonder, will I be able to comprehend the 3 sword scars with my talent in sword principle? Jian Wushuang clasped both his hands with a sense of expectation. After scanning the 3 sword scars, Jian Wushuang did not stay here. Instead, he went on a walk around the sword pavilion. In the sword pavilion, he did see a lot of experiences and some secret skills that were left behind by experts of sword principle. However, Jian Wushuang wasn't qualified to directly acquire these experiences and secret skills. If he wanted to meditate on them, he had to send an application to the seniors of the ancient sect. For now, he was nothing more than a disciple, someone who didn't even have the eligibility to send in an application, so he had to be apprenticed to an expert who was able to help him with the application. Palace Master Xian Yi was right. All the disciples of the ancient sect become apprenticed to an expert so that they can gain access to more resources. Jian Wushuang pondered and before long left the sword palace. Back at Enlightenment Mountain, Jian Wushuang found a deserted cave mansion and met Feng and Huaying. In front of them, on the stone table, was a good wine that had been brought by Huaying from his hometown. Currently, the 3 people were drinking with each other. When I was still in the ancient world, I used to daydream about what the sects in the eternal world would look like. However, I didn't know what the sects really looked like until I came to the ancient sect. The Dao Palace is amazing, said Huaying. It's so amazing to see so many experts gathered there to explore the Dao. Each of the 13 palace masters has an enormously profound understanding of the Dao and they never hesitate to pass on their experience to others. It's no wonder such a sect can develop such strong disciples, Feng said approvingly. Both of them visited the Dao Palace, where they were shocked by what they saw. There are a good many geniuses in the ancient sect, let alone experts. They all have a profound comprehension of the Dao. Compared to those disciples in the ancient sect, we can only find ourselves at the very bottom of the list. I'm afraid the 3 of us will lose the qualification to be an inner disciple at the sect competition in 2 years, Huaying said. After they heard that, a wry smile played across Feng's lips while Jian Wushuang gave a shrug. In the ancient sect, only those who have been there for less than 500 years could still be a disciple. But there was still a tremendous number of disciples, even if many of them were outer disciples. However, many outer disciples were more gifted than inner disciples and had an extremely high level of understanding on the Dao. Looking at the outer disciples that were currently in the ancient sect, even the weakest had fully comprehended the first occult while the slightly stronger disciples had fully comprehended 2 different occults. Gong Chao, who ranked first at Firmament Territory Feast, had only comprehended 2 occults. As for those who stood at the top among the outer disciples, there were more than 10 geniuses that had already grasped 3 different occults. With their current strength, even the strongest one, Jian Wushuang, wouldn't even be ranked in the middle of these outer disciples. Once the sect competition began in 2 years, the weakest inner disciples would be challenged by those outer disciples. If they failed, they would be downgraded to outer disciples and they would no longer be able to stay at Enlightenment Mountain. We didn't have an appropriate condition for cultivation when we were in the ancient world, so we made little progress. Now that we have arrived at the ancient sect, where we will be provided with so many cultivation resources, we can make much better progress than before. Not to mention that we still have 2 years to put up a good fight. Feng gripped both of his hands tightly, with a wild gleam in his eyes as he continued in a low voice. Even though I may be downgraded to an outer disciple 2 years from now, I won't regret it as long as I know I tried. Exactly. Jian Wushuang nodded and said solemnly, Palace Master Xian Yi said the first 2 years in the ancient sect would be the best time to make breakthroughs for disciples like us who just joined the ancient sect, especially inner disciples. As long as we try hard, our strength should be able to reach a brand new level, so we still have a little hope for the sect competition in 2 years. Well, let's toast to the 3 of us still being able to drink at Enlightenment Mountain in 2 years. Huaying raised his glass and smiled. Cheers. Both Jian Wushuang and Feng raised their glasses. The 3 of them were selected as candidates to join the ancient sect during the Firmament Territory Feast and they were all inner disciples, so it was only natural that they stuck together. After drinking a cup of wine, Feng pursed his lips and said, "Since we have just joined the ancient sect, we need to find a suitable expert and become apprenticed to him. Under his personal guidance and with the many cultivation resources of the ancient sect, our strength should grow by leaps and bounds. Earlier today I went to Dao Palace and found a suitable expert, so I will go visit him tomorrow. I also have a suitable candidate who is a palace master, but I have no idea whether or not he would be willing to accept me. Anyway, I will have a try," Huang said and smiled. "Jian Wushuang, what do you think?" Both Feng and Huang looked at Jian Wushuang. I'm in no hurry. After all, I have not been to the Dao Palace yet," Jian Wushuang said, then smiled briefly. "Your talent is so incredible. I suppose those palace masters and vice palace masters would scramble to accept you as their disciple, so you don't really need to visit them personally," Huang said with a smile. Jian Wushuang couldn't help laughing. While the three of them were busy drinking together, Xianyi was sending the information on Jian Wushuang, Feng, Huang, Bingshan, Xianing, and Wu Huang as well as their performance at the Firmament Territory Feast, to those palace masters and vice palace masters in the Dao Palace. These palace masters and vice palace masters just scanned it briefly. They appeared unimpressed by the first 5 candidates, but when they saw Jian Wushuang's information, they were all astounded. How can he be so powerful with a cultivation age less than 40 years in a place like the ancient world? Even in the eternal world, it's unbelievable to reach that level in less than 40 years, not to mention that he came from the ancient world. What an exceptional genius. Unfortunately, he is good at sword principle and meditates on the world Dao and the slaughter Dao, which are not my strong points. Chapter 661 Rejection. Chapter 661 Rejection. The various palace masters and vice palace masters in the Dao Palace were amazed by Jian Wushuang's talent, and they secretly felt regretful that they weren't good at the Daos that Jian Wushuang meditated on. Of course, there were some that didn't feel that way. Each of the 13 palace masters in the Dao Palace explored different Daos, so there were 2 palace masters, Baiyu and Immortality, who were good at the world Dao and the slaughter Dao respectively. After seeing Jian Wushuang's information, both of these palace masters were a bit interested in him. Jian Wushuang is so talented. If he cultivates well, he'll definitely reach the eternal realm in the future. Although I have many disciples, there are no more than 3 who have a chance of reaching the eternal realm, but their chances of success are extremely low. Compared with Jian Wushuang, those 3 are far behind him in strength. It would really be a shame to miss out on such a genius. Palace Master Baiyu remained silent as he quickly called upon a disciple under him and commanded, "You, go deliver my token to Jian Wushuang and tell him that Baiyu is willing to take him as a disciple. He can come see me if he agrees." Yes, the disciple immediately set out to look for Jian Wushuang. At the same time, a middle-aged man in a black robe, surrounded by an endless killing intent, also appeared at Enlightenment Mountain. Jian Wushuang, a soft voice spread out and entered a specific cave mansion. Jian Wushuang, who had been devoting himself to cultivation inside the cave mansion, woke up with a start and quickly appeared outside the cave mansion. Jian Wushuang looked at the black-robed middle-aged man as if he was an unparalleled god of death because of the terrifying atmosphere that was almost suffocating. "I am Immortality, one of palace masters from the Dao Palace, and I am good at the slaughter Dao," the middle-aged man said. "You're a palace master?" Jian Wushuang was stunned at first, but quickly regained his composure and bowed to him. "Respectful greetings, Palace Master Immortality." "Stand up." Jian Wushuang straightened his back when Immortality waved at him, and then he got to the point. "I've browsed through your information. You're a real talent with exceptional potential. If you cultivate properly, you'll certainly be one of the top experts in the ancient sect. I'm willing to take you as my apprentice. Are you willing?" Personal disciple? It seemed to appeal Jian Wushuang. Not long ago, someone came to give him a token from Baiyu who also said he intended to accept him as a personal disciple, but now Immortality was here in person. "You are good at the slaughter Dao and I currently remain as the foremost in comprehending the slaughter Dao," Immortality added. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and immediately said, "I'm sorry, Palace Master Immortality. I currently have no plans to apprentice to anyone." Immortality frowned. Generally speaking, disciples would select an expert to apprentice to right after joining the ancient sect. Jian Wushuang should do the same, but he just said he had no intention to do so. Even though he said it in a tactful way, he had still refused Immortality. What a pity. Mo Tao shook his head, but he didn't force him. You should take some time and think about it. After saying this, Mo Tao left. Not long after Mo Tao left, several Vice Palace Masters from the Dao Palace and even the Vice Palace Masters from the Sword Palace, except Vice Palace Master Nye, visited Jian Wushuang for one purpose, to take him as their apprentice. When Feng and Huiying heard about this preferential treatment, they got a bit jealous. It was known to all that both of them wanted to apprentice to a palace master or even a vice palace master, but they had to go through some trials and tribulations first. Yet, these palace masters and vice palace masters took the initiative to come to Jian Wushuang and even battle over him. Surprisingly, however, all these experts who wanted him to become their apprentice were rejected by him. Including the palace masters from the Dao Palace like Baiyu and Mo Tao, as well as that vice palace master from the Sword Palace, Jian Wushuang had rejected them all. Jian Wushuang stood there alone, inside the ancient sect, cultivating quietly. During the day he usually stayed at the Sword Palace, in front of the stone tablet at Sword Tower, meditating on the 3 sword scars. Sometimes he would head to the Dao Palace and listen to lectures delivered by experts who were good at World Dao and Slaughter Dao. In the evening he returned to Enlightenment Mountain, letting his 2 original bodies separate and meditate quietly. He spent almost every day cultivating and meditating, maintaining a busy schedule. In a flash, 1 month had passed. At the Dao Palace, numerous disciples of the ancient sect sat with their legs crossed at the huge martial arts practice field. At the very front, the strapping Feng with sword-shaped eyebrows, prostrated himself before a palace master and gave him 3 respectful kowtows. "Master, I pay my respects." Feng's voice echoed throughout the entire martial arts practice field. Many of the disciples at the martial arts practice field looked at Feng with envious eyes. He's really persistent. Indeed. He spent a whole month going through trails, with an indomitable fighting spirit, until he finally managed to become apprentice to Palace Master Destruction as a personal disciple. The barrier for becoming an apprentice to Palace Master Destruction was very high. He's so lucky to have become one of the personal disciples. Nearly all the disciples of the ancient sect would apprentice to an expert, while most of them would apprentice to those vice palace masters at the level of a superior divine realm expert. There was only a tiny minority who were lucky enough to apprentice to the 13 palace masters, and these disciples were still split into nominal disciples and personal disciples. Nominal disciples existed only in name. Although they could attend the lectures of the palace master and be instructed, the treatment was poorer compared with those personal disciples. In the ancient sect, almost every palace master or vice palace master had plenty of nominal disciples, but the number of personal disciples was small. They would try their best to instruct every personal disciple. The reasons Feng was able to become the personal disciple of Palace Master Destruction were that, on the one hand, he was gifted in the Destruction Dao and, on the other hand, he had perseverance and determination. So he was finally accepted. Another month passed. Today Huiying, who had been brought back like Jian Wushuang and Feng as an inner disciple, was finally apprenticed to an expert. The one he apprenticed to was also a palace master, but he was somewhat unfortunate. That palace master was only willing to take him as a nominal disciple because his cultivation age was so long that his potential had been exhausted. Even though he was only a nominal disciple, Huiying still felt happy about it. In addition, the other 3 people, Bing Shan, Xianying and Wu Huang, were also able to apprentice to an expert within these 2 months. However, these 3 were only able to apprentice to those vice palace masters as nominal disciples. They would all have to try harder if they wanted to become personal disciples. As of now, 5 out of the 6 people that Xian Yi brought back from Firmament Territory Feast had been apprenticed. Only Jian Wushuang was still cultivating on his own. Chapter 662 Jian Wushuang's Pride. Chapter 662, Jian Wushuang's Pride. There were 13 palace masters and plenty of vice palace masters in the Dao Palace. They would occasionally gather together. Right now, 4 palace masters had gathered in a pavilion to drink. Among them was Feng's master, Palace Master Destruction. "Destruction, how's your new personal disciple, Feng?" a palace master asked casually. "Not bad. Although his talent is only average among my personal disciples, he's perseverant and has a stable foundation. As long as he's taught step by step in the future, he'll be able to make good progress. He's even got a good chance of reaching the eternal realm, Palace Master Destruction said and laughed. Congratulations. You've accepted another good disciple. Among the 6 men Palace Master Xian Yi brought back from the Firmament Territory feast, Feng seems to be the best. The others are just ordinary and that Jian Wushuang. He's too disappointing, a black-clothed lady said, shaking her head slightly. Jian Wushuang. Hearing that, all the palace masters looked at each other speechlessly. 2 months ago, when they heard from Xian Yi that Jian Wushuang had cultivated for less than 40 years and came from the ancient world, they were astonished at Jian Wushuang's talent. Had they been good at the type of Tao which Jian Wushuang mediated on, they would have chosen him as a personal disciple. However, their impression of Jian Wushuang had been ruined to some extent during the past 2 months. He should have had a wonderful prospect. Unfortunately, he's too conceited and proud. The black-clothed lady said, even though he's talented, he came from the ancient world and his vision is too narrow. He has no idea how to develop himself in the future. What's most important for him now is to look for a good master. With a master's guidance and the cultivation resources in the ancient sect, his talent can be fully developed. It's a pity that he is too arrogant. During the past 2 months, many vice palace masters who are good at world Tao or slaughter Tao have talked with him and wanted to accept him as a disciple. Even Palace Master Baiyu and Mo Tao went to talk to him in person, but all of them were rejected by him. Palace Master Baiyu will master the 9 occults of the world Tao soon. Palace Master Mo Tao's comprehension of the slaughter Tao is beyond anyone in the whole ancient sect. Jian Wushuang should feel lucky to be a disciple of either of them. How could he reject their offer? Does he think that he's so talented that he doesn't need any guidance? Upon hearing this, the other 3 palace master nodded quietly. He's indeed too proud. He's too young. Feng is different. He has cultivated for 1900 years and possesses a persistent and modest personality. I heard that Jian Wushuang often been staying in front of the sword tower over the past 2 months to meditate on the 3 sword scars left by Xian Yi. If I haven't guessed wrong, he does intend to choose a master, but his target is Xian Yi. Palace Master Xian Yi? The black-clothed lady sneered. Xian Yi is indeed strong. But one should choose an appropriate master instead of a strong one. Xian Yi's comprehension of world Tao and slaughter Tao isn't comparable to that of Palace Master Baiyu and Mo Tao. He can teach Jian Wushuang sword principle at most. In addition, is it so easy to be a disciple of Palace Master Xian Yi? The 3 sword scars left by Xian Yi are so enigmatic that no one has been able to fully comprehend them so far. The first 2 sword scars alone are enough to make many sword principle geniuses ponder for hundreds of years. When he fully comprehends the first 2 sword scars, he'll have already missed his best stage of growth. The loss outweighs the gain. If I were him, I would definitely choose to be a disciple of Palace Master Baiyu or Mo Tao. Then I would take my time to meditate on the 3 sword scars and try to be a disciple of Palace Master Xian Yi. After all, in ancient sect, it's acceptable for a genius to be a disciple of 2 or more experts. Other palace masters nodded their assent. Who knows what he's thinking? Every genius is proud. Just wait, when the sect competition starts in 2 years, he certainly won't be able to keep his position as an inner disciple. The competition among the outer disciples is more intense. After he suffers some setbacks and learns some lessons, he'll naturally understand how foolish his choice was and then he'll find a way to make amends. Ah, what a pity. After all, he's still a peerless genius. Lots of disciples who were good at sword principle had gathered in the sword palace. When Jian Wushuang showed up, he immediately received many strange stares. It has already been 2 months. Hasn't Jian Wushuang chosen a master yet? Hey, he's really stupid. Does he think he can be so disdainful because of his talent? Without guidance from experts, he will have to cultivate by himself. Wait and see, he'll learn a lesson in the sect competition 2 years from now. Many disciples lowered their voices while talking about him, but Jian Wushuang could still hear some of their voices clearly. However, he did not pay attention to these discussions and went directly to the sword tower. He quickly arrived at the stone tablet with the 3 sword scars on it. Sitting down in front of the stone tablet, Jian Wushuang sighed in relief and slowly calmed down. 2 months have passed. Feng Huiying and even Bing Shan, Xianing and Wu Huang have chosen their masters. I'm still cultivating alone without guidance from any experts. It's no wonder these disciples in the ancient sect are gossiping about me in private. I'm afraid that lots of people are saying I'm conceited, Jian Wushuang thought with a smile. He did not care about these things though. They aren't me and don't know what I've been through. How can they know what I'm thinking? Jian Wushuang thought. He had made his decision the moment he entered the ancient sect and saw the 3 sword scars on the stone tablet. He would definitely choose a master. A master's guidance would help him improve faster. However, he had never had a master since the day he was born. Perhaps the super expert who created the heavenly creation skill could barely be counted as his master, but he had never really kowtowed to any master. Therefore he would not choose his first master easily. His master should be able to guide his cultivation and more importantly, his personality and strength had to make Jian Wushuang genuinely admire him. In the whole ancient sect, only one man was qualified, and that person was the palace master of Sword Palace, Xuan. Chapter 663 Comprehension. Chapter 663, Comprehension. In the eternal world, a man could have 2, 3 or even more masters. The more masters the better as long as his masters could help him with his cultivation. But Jian Wushuang was different. He came from the ancient world, where a warrior usually had only 1 master or 2 masters at most. The relationship between the master and disciple was very important. After all, as a warrior's strength grew stronger and stronger, many of his relatives and friends would gradually grow old and die. The ones who could still accompany him were usually his disciples or masters. Therefore he would not choose a master easily. Both Palace Master Baiyu and Mo Tao have extremely high comprehension of the Tao and they're definitely qualified to be my masters. However, I have no knowledge of their personalities. Jian Wushuang shook his head while pondering. In the whole ancient sect, the only person he admired both in strength and personality was Xuan. Therefore the only master he wanted to accept was Xuan. He did not care if other people thought he was arrogant or conceited. As for the condition to become Xuan's disciple, it might be impossible for other people to completely comprehend the 3 sword scars, but not for Jian Wushuang. He possessed the strongest sword soul and heaven-defying talent in sword principle. In addition, he had reached the heaven-treading realm, which meant his comprehension ability was currently at its highest. He was sure that he could fully comprehend the 3 sword scars. The first sword scar contains 9 sword movements, while the second one looks identical with the first one, but it actually contains 3 sword movements that originate from those 9 sword movements. The 3 sword scars were extremely enigmatic. The 9 sword movements in the first sword scar alone were extremely profound. For example, Zhu Lai, who had a certain level of talent in sword principle, still spent more than 10 years on the first sword scar before he fully comprehended the 9 sword movements. However, no one knew that Jian Wushuang had fully comprehended them in 2 months. Jian Wushuang had thoroughly comprehended the first sword scar. It took Zhu Lai more than 10 years to do it, but Jian Wushuang succeeded in only 2 months. He had already started meditating on the second sword scar. Jian Wushuang insisted on his belief and goal, continuing to cultivate while relying on his strongest sword soul and supreme talent that had been endowed to him by the heaven-treading realm and the heavenly creation skill. Time flew. No matter what the disciples in the ancient sect said about him, Jian Wushuang still cultivated and meditated alone. Half a year had elapsed since Jian Wushuang first entered the ancient sect. In front of the dark stone tablet at the sword tower, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes which were sparkling with surprise. I finally succeeded. In the past 6 months he had spent most of his time meditating in front of the sword tower. 4 months ago he had already fully comprehended the first sword scar. The second sword scar should be far more difficult to comprehend than the first one for ordinary experts. But Jian Wushuang had reached the heaven-treading realm and had a terrifying level of talent and comprehension. 4 months. 4 months after Jian Wushuang fully comprehended the first sword scar, he had also completely comprehended the second one. Palace Master Xuan will give a lecture in the sword tower 2 days from now. It's a good time for me to have finished comprehending the second sword scar. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and then turned to inspect the third sword scar. The last sword scar. This sword scar. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He thought the 3 sword scars were exactly the same half a year ago. However, after he comprehended the first one, he felt the second and third were different. The second sword scar contained 3 sword movements that originated from the 9 movements in the first one. The third sword scar contained 1 sword movement which was the integration of the 9 sword movements. So, naturally, the third sword scar was the most difficult. It took me half a year to fully comprehend the first and second sword scar. I wonder how long it'll take me to comprehend the third one, Jian Wushuang thought and then continued to meditate. The next day, a woman with sky-blue hair and a beautiful face was sitting on the highest platform in the huge martial arts practice field of the Sword Palace. Many disciples from the Sword Palace had gathered around her and were listening carefully to her lecture. This absolute beauty was the second Vice Palace Master of Sword Palace, Ling Yu. When Jian Wushuang first came to the ancient sect half a year ago, Ling Yu also expressed her wish to accept Jian Wushuang as her personal disciple, but she was rejected by Jian Wushuang. Ling Yu quickly finished her lecture and was about to leave when Jian Wushuang stood up. Vice Palace Master, Jian Wushuang appeared in front of Ling Yu and bowed slightly. Jian Wushuang, Ling Yu glanced at him, her beautiful eyebrows slightly raising. She had been shocked by Jian Wushuang's talent. However, Jian Wushuang had not chosen a master from the ancient sect even now, so he had been pegged as being proud and conceited. Many experts, including her, were disappointed with him. If Jian Wushuang had chosen me, Palace Master Baiyu or Palace Master Imo Tao as his master, he would have already reached a new level. Nevertheless, he chose to cultivate by himself. It's unlikely that he'll make great progress during this period of time. It can be said that he wasted half a year, Ling Yu thought, shaking her head slightly. Although it was a pity, she would not force him to change his mind. Everyone had to make their own choices and follow their own path in life. Since Jian Wushuang chose to refuse the offer of her and the other experts, they would not insist no matter how talented he was. Jian Wushuang, what can I do for you? Ling Yu asked. Well, I've been meditating on the 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xian Yi and I had some comprehensions yesterday, Jian Wushuang said. Oh. Ling Yu raised her eyebrows. The Sword Palace disciples on the martial arts practice field turned to Jian Wushuang in surprise. Some comprehensions. Has he fully comprehended the first sword scar in just half a year? Impossible. The 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xian Yi are so enigmatic. Even the 9 sword movements contained in the first sword scar are so profound. Even though Jian Wushuang has an extremely high gift in sword principle, it's impossible for him to fully comprehend the first sword scar in half a year. I've been meditating on the first sword scar for nearly 20 years and have only just mastered the 7th sword movement. Did he expect to comprehend the 9 sword movements in half a year? He must be joking. Chapter 664 3 Sword Movements. Chapter 664 3 Sword Movements. All the Sword Palace disciples here knew how enigmatic the 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xian Yi were. In their view, it was not possible to fully understand the first sword scar in only half a year. Even Ling Yu was a little surprised, but she still said, "Display it to us." Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. As he turned over his palm, the heart-killing sword appeared in his hand. The disciples surrounding Jian Wushuang immediately stepped backward. Without much preparation, Jian Wushuang just took a deep breath and then started. He waved his sword and began executing the 3 sword movements. The first sword stroke was a straight stab and the blade possessed an unprecedented sharpness that seemed to tear through everything. As it swept through the space in front of him, the air began to hum softly. The second sword stroke was a harsh chop. Endless power was accumulated at a point and then burst out in an instant, giving off the impression that it was invincible and could destroy anything. Then he released a sword slash. This stroke was extremely dazzling and seemed to contain a special magic power. Even Vice Palace Master Ling Yu could not help being attracted when by the slashing movement of this long sword. He displayed the 3 sword strokes, one after the other, without pause. Then he stopped. The whole martial arts practice field fell into complete silence. The sword principal disciples were endlessly shocked. Some were stunned while others were full of doubts and had a hint of ridicule written on their faces. Just 3 sword movements? As expected. The first sword scar contains 9 sword movements, but he only displays 3. His sword movements looked strong, but he's still far from fully mastering the 9 sword movements, a disciple who had a shallow comprehension of the first sword scar said sarcastically. Just as he finished speaking. Shut up. Zhu Lai, who stood next to the disciple, scolded him in a low voice. You idiot. Don't speak nonsense when you don't understand. What do you mean? The disciple was confused, but he quickly realized that other disciples as well as Vice Palace Master Ling Yu were staring at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. The next moment the audience burst out in an uproar. 3 sword movements? They're the 3 sword movements from the second sword scar. How is that possible? The disciples who had some knowledge of the three sword scars were stunned. Even Vice Palace Master Ling Yu was full of unprecedented shock. Just now they had doubted whether Jian Wushuang could display the 9 sword movements contained in the first sword scar, but Jian Wushuang had only displayed 3 sword movements, but they originated from the integration of the 9 sword movements. That was to say, not only had Jian Wushuang fully comprehended the first sword scar, he had also comprehended the second one. Just half a year. He had comprehended the first and second sword scar in just half a year. God. Among the crowd, Zhu Lai opened his eyes wide and stared at Jian Wushuang. I've been meditating on the 3 sword scars this whole time. It took me over 10 years to fully comprehend the first one, but it's too difficult to integrate the 9 sword movements into 3 movements. It will take me at least dozens of years or hundreds of years. Jian Wushuang, senior brother Wushuang. Has he fully comprehended the first and second sword scar in just half a year? Zhu Lai was in a complete daze. Vice Palace Master Ling Yu, have I reached the requirements? Jian Wushuang looked up at Ling Yu, who was standing on the high platform. Ling Yu finally recovered from the shock. She glanced at Jian Wushuang in horror and immediately nodded. Palace Master has said that those who comprehend the first sword scar are qualified to listen to his lecture in the sword tower. Those who comprehend the second one can be his nominal disciple. Since you've completely comprehended the second sword scar, you can be his disciple now. I'll send a message to Palace Master Xianyi right now. Thank you, Jian Wushuang said. Ling Yu took a deep breath and then took out a messaging slip. Palace Master Xianyi, Ling Yu had just begun to talk. I already know. I'll be lecturing in the sword tower tomorrow. Tell him to come, Xianyi had already responded. I see. Ling Yu turned to Jian Wushuang and said, Palace Master Xianyi has replied. He said for you to go to the sword tower and attend his lecture tomorrow. He'll have some arrangements for you. Jian Wushuang nodded and then left the sword palace without paying any attention to the awe and admiration in the gazes of the disciples around him. He headed directly towards Enlightenment Mountain. However, at the moment in the sky above the sword palace, a man was standing quietly, his eyes gazing through the endless void at Jian Wushuang, who was walking slowly toward Enlightenment Mountain. In just half a year he has completely comprehended the second sword scar. He really is the owner of the strongest sword soul. The white-robed Xianyi stood there with his hands behind his back and a gentle smile on his face. Sword soul was determined by the person's talent in sword principle. The stronger the sword soul was, the higher their gift in sword principle was. The strongest sword soul meant that Jian Wushuang's talent for sword principle was matchless in the world. So it was only natural that it was not difficult for a genius with such an amazing talent in sword principle to fully comprehend his sword scars. This boy is good at sword principle, possesses the strongest sword soul, and he has long since decided to choose me as his master. The moment he entered the ancient sect, he already understood himself and had chosen his path. Even if many of the experts in the ancient sect think his choice is wrong, as long as he thinks it's right, he'll persist. No matter how others think of him, he insists on his own choice. He may look stupid and stubborn. However, such a person has real willpower. What's more, he has the strongest sword soul, so he has a good reason to be so confident. Everyone thought that it would take him a long time to comprehend the 3 sword scars, but it only took him half a year to fully comprehend 2 of them. He's very confident and I like his confidence. It seems like I'll have another disciple soon. Xianyi murmured to himself, but the smile on his face showed that he was very satisfied with Jian Wushuang. He brought Jian Wushuang, Feng and Hua Ying back from the Firmament Territory feast. He had watched their growth in the ancient sect during the past half year. Even though Jian Wushuang was thought to be wasting his talent in the eyes of the numerous experts in the ancient sect, Xianyi did not show up and try to persuade him to change his mind. He wanted to see whether Jian Wushuang could persist with his own choice and not be affected by others. It had been proven that the choice Jian Wushuang made was right. Chapter 665, Acknowledging Xianyi as Master. Chapter 665, Acknowledging Xianyi as Master. On that same day, the news that Jian Wushuang had completely comprehended the first and second sword scars left by Palace Master Xianyi spread through the whole ancient sect. Those who had thought Jian Wushuang was too proud and conceited were immediately dumbfounded. They never dreamed that Jian Wushuang's gift in sword principle would be so high. Recalling Jian Wushuang's behavior in the past half year, no one dared to say that he was conceited anymore. There was a thin line between confidence and conceit. If Jian Wushuang did not succeed in half a year or if his future performance was mediocre, it could be said that he was conceited, but now Jian Wushuang had given those people a severe slap in the face. Jian Wushuang had absolute confidence in his own choice. Since he had comprehended the second sword scar in just half a year, who could guarantee that he would not comprehend the third one in the future? Once he comprehended it, he would be the personal disciple of Palace Master Xian Yi and would definitely have limitless prospects with Xian Yi's personal guidance. Palace Master Xian Yi. Many disciples in the ancient sect were jealous of Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xian Yi had a very supreme and special position in the ancient sect. One of the important reasons that the ancient sect, as a top sect, was able to surpass the three magnates to some extent was the existence of Palace Master Xian Yi. Many experts in the ancient sect were proficient in various weapon daos, but only Palace Master Xian Yi was able to establish Sword Palace. Everyone in the ancient sect knew about the strength and mystery of Palace Master Xian Yi. They all dreamed of being his disciple, but the requirement was too harsh. The experts who knew that Jian Wushuang wanted to be the disciple of Palace Master Xian Yi looked down on his choice, as Xian Yi's condition was too harsh and it would take a long time for Jian Wushuang to achieve it. But now, in only half a year, Jian Wushuang had become Xian Yi's nominal disciple. His achievement filled people with envy and admiration. The next day, Sword Tower opened. Since Palace Master Xian Yi would be giving a lecture in person, all the Sword Principal disciples who had completely comprehended the first Sword Scar went to the Sword Tower. Inside the Sword Tower, over 20 Sword Principal disciples sat cross-legged in the open space. Naturally, Jian Wushuang was among them. Before long, a white-robed Xian Yi appeared at the top of the Sword Tower. Everyone immediately quieted down. Xian Yi looked around at all the people below and nodded slightly, then directly started teaching. Swords are predominantly for killing. You can use the sword tip to stab, the sword edge to chop, the sword back to block, and the sword blade to slash. It can be said that the sword is a moderate weapon as it can be used to attack and defend. It's comprehensive and balanced. Sword principle is the way of killing, broad and profound. Sword soul is just the beginning of sword principle. Awakening the sword soul means that you're qualified to meditate on sword principle. That is to say, no matter how strong your sword soul is, you still have not mastered sword principle. The real sword principle is based on the sword heart. Sword heart. Jian Wushuang was listening carefully. The explanation on sword principle by Xian Yi was completely different from that of Vice Palace Master Nie and Ling Yu. The sword principle explained by Palace Master Xian Yi was a process from simplicity to complexity, like a tree that gradually evolved from a common seedling to a towering tree. It was very profound and complicated. Jian Wushuang and other disciples present could not fully understand all the things being explained by Xian Yi, but the part which they understood benefited them greatly. Every word from the mouth of Palace Master Xian Yi seemed to contain special magic and directly explain the essence of sword principle. Currently, inside Sword Tower, every disciple was fascinated by his words, including Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xian Yi kept teaching for one whole day and night. The greatest sword principle starts from simplicity, then strives for complexity, but eventually returns to simplicity. When he reached this point, Xian Yi finally stopped. Most of the disciples who attended the lecture below had fallen into meditation. It was only after a while that they finally recovered themselves. Their faces were full of pleasure and regret. They were pleased because Xian Yi had talked directly about the essence of sword principle, which benefited them a lot. They had also learned many things which they had never thought of before. It was much better than what Vice Palace Master Nie and Ling Yu taught them. They felt regret because Palace Master Xian Yi rarely gave lectures. He usually only gave a lecture once a year or sometimes even once every few years. The opportunity was too rare. Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xian Yi looked down. Jian Wushuang had just woken up from the meditation when he heard Palace Master Xian Yi call his name. He immediately stood up and stepped forward. Palace Master Xian Yi, Jian Wushuang greeted him with a hint of humility. When I left the 3 sword scars outside of the sword tower, I set some rules. Since you've completely comprehended the second sword scar, you're my nominal disciple from now on, Palace Master Xian Yi said. Disciple Jian Wushuang pays respects to Master. Jian Wushuang immediately knelt down in front of Xian Yi and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Rise, Xian Yi waved his hand. Jian Wushuang stood up immediately. Follow me. The rest of the people can leave, Xian Yi said. The disciples inside Sword Tower immediately dispersed one after another, while Jian Wushuang followed Xian Yi to the second floor of the Sword Tower. Jian Wushuang sat face to face with Xian Yi at a long table as Xian Yi looked at him with a gentle smile on his face. When you began to study the 3 sword scars, I knew I would have a new disciple. But I never expected it to be so soon, Xian Yi smiled. In the ancient sect and even the entire firmament territory, only you can comprehend the second sword scar in half a year as you possess the strongest sword soul. Jian Wushuang was shocked by his words. Master, you knew? Jian Wushuang was surprised. After he came to the eternal world, he had never exposed his strongest sword soul in front of people. Even at the firmament territory feast, he only exerted 80% of his sword soul power when he fought with Gong Chao because he did not want people to find out about his strongest sword soul. He had thought that he hid it well. He never expected that Palace Master Xian Yi had discovered the existence of his strongest sword soul long ago. The moment I saw you, my sword heart was provoked, so I immediately knew that your sword soul was extraordinary. Xian Yi explained with a smile. At that time only my doppelganger went to the firmament territory feast, so I was not sure whether you owned the strongest sword soul. However, when you arrived at the ancient sect and my original body saw you, I became certain that you indeed possessed the strongest sword soul which make all sword principal warriors envious. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.